Oh boy, how are you? How's it going?
I It's been quite a week, hasn't it?
It
Um,
feels like it's been like a month.
every
Yeah.
day seems like it covers so much.
Hmm.
So much is
Yeah.
happening. Uh,
Can you stop the screen share, by the way?
oh yeah, sure.
Oh, there you go. I can see you now. Okay.
There we are.
Yeah. So what were you saying? How's it going?
Well, personally, I have much to be grateful for, as do many of
Mm.
us. Healthy. I have a safe place to live. My city has not erupted in. We don't have police shooting people down in our town, and we don't have hurricanes bearing down on us.
Mm.
um, but unfortunately I have spent some time watching the convention, which is um, causes some dismay at our house.
I watched it the first day, and then I couldn't watch anymore. I watched Nikki Haley's speech, I guess, the second day, but I just couldn't do more. But I watched enough to get scared that even though it's all bullshit, but I feel like it's going to gain traction and that a lot of people are going to be convinced.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
very worried about that too, because they're using language that sounds so normal and reasonable, but they're using it to describe extremely radical right-wing ideas. And so they've got this very radical agenda that they've sort of cloaked in religion and patriotism, and there's nothing religious or patriotic about it. And that feels, it feels like an insult and a slap and overwhelming. And I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out, how do you think about it all, because there seems to be so much to it.
Hmm. So, you know, besides the convention, which kind of I was sort of expecting more or less what we saw, this situation in Wisconsin is really freaking me out. Yesterday, I think I had something close to an anxiety attack because I felt like I was being gaslit. They're trying to turn this kid who murdered people, 17-year-old murdered people, into a hero, and it was happening before our eyes. And I thought I was going to lose my mind. I felt like they were trying to make us crazy.
And I think that gaslighting is a very apt, um, it's a very apt term. Uh, they are trying to confuse us, overwhelm us, make us lose confidence in our own sanity. And that's exactly what gaslighting is. So when I saw that Tucker Carlson had described this young radicalized terrorist who shot people with a semi-automatic rifle for, as far as I can tell, no reason, um, and claimed that he was some kind of vigilante hero because the police hadn't cracked down on the protests, hadn't shut them down, and
Mhm.
therefore the vigilantes had to do it. I was at three sort of reactions came to me in waves, right? I was horrified, I was appalled, I was offended, and then I thought, wow, he's really good at that. Like, who could see that situation and come up with a way to turn this kid? It's not like this, he was saving a damsel in distress. There was no benefit to what he did. There was no attempt at good to what he did. And Tucker Carlson managed to spin it somehow in a way that at first glance seemed calm and reasonable, and it was beyond horrifying. So then I started, so, you know, my first reaction was horror. My second reaction was, wow, they're really good at that. And my third reaction was, it is all too much. There is so many things to be outraged about, and they're coming from every direction, from undermining the election to embracing terrorists to embracing conspiracy theories. That's another thing that's been spilling over like crazy in the last week or so, is suddenly QAnon is completely mainstream. And I realized I had this moment of clarity around, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. I had this moment of clarity when I said, this is all radical extremism, that it's all comes under one single umbrella. This is not a million different things. This is one thing. Every sort of radical right extremist element has come together and formed a knot. And I think that gave me a sense of calm, because suddenly I wasn't trying to think of 1,000 different problems at once. I had a box to put that all in. And so instead of thinking about how do we deal with 1,000 different things, all I had to think about is, no, we only have one thing. It's radical right extremism. And that is what we're fighting.
Yeah. I think you're right that part of what's frustrating is not being able to name it. You know, because often I'm just going, WTF? What? You know,
how can you say that? How can they say that? How can they do that? Like 100 times a day.
Right. Yeah. And I think it is absolutely important to name it. And I think also, you know, as you point out, like it's important to repeat it. That what we're seeing, this is what we're seeing, and it's a collective experience. And it is happening by design, and it is being weaponized. I am being driven crazy. I mean, it really is gaslighting. This is what abusers do to their victims. You know, they just gaslight them, and to the point where you feel like you have no connection to reality and to other people, and you just kind of just go inward. And that is a very, very bad place to be. Less than 10 weeks before the election, is to be so inward that you can't
this
engage.
Is not a good time for fetal position.
No, it's the worst time. But I do feel that is kind of their strategy. They want us really confused and shut down.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, you know, if you study the disinformation campaigns of 2016, 2015, and 2016, and then later in 2018, a lot of it wasn't so much to change people's minds as to just overwhelm their ability to tell truth from fiction and to amplify the emotional content of everything. So they would mess with the left, they would mess with the right, they would mess with communities where there was communities of color, they would mess with local communities just to make things confusing and emotional. And it works very, very well, unfortunately. But yeah, so there's a couple things there, right? So one is, as you say, it's emotionally like a wrecking ball, right? To try to observe this and try to remain sane and focused, right? But two, one of the things that people have spent a lot of time trying to figure out is, why is the media not addressing this differently, right? Why is the mainstream media still using this very nominally objective language and not bringing attention to what's going on so that it's easier to understand? And one of the things I spent a lot of time sort of studying the patterns of how things go from being a random meme on a fringe site to a mainstream media thing. And a lot of it has to do with what we repeat. So the reason that disinformation is so successful is because it's really simplistic and easy to remember. It travels, as a result, it travels fast, but it's hugely repeated. And that games the amplification, it gets amplified on the social media. But then the media starts picking it up, right? If people are paying a lot of attention to an issue, the media pays a lot of attention to the issue. And right now, people are paying attention to the 758 different horror show car crash things, instead of staying, instead of staying sort of focused. And I think that once we have a name for what we're looking at as a whole, and the name I'm giving it is radical right extremism, if every time it comes up in conversation, if every time something, you know, the next crazy statement about whatever comes up, the first response we have to train ourselves to say, oh, that's radical right extremism. It may look like it's supposed to be patriotic, or it may look like it's for free speech, or it may look like it's a an embrace of the church, but that's really radical right extremism. And if the community makes that a mantra, eventually, first of all, it'll calm us down because we know what we're talking about instead of a million different things. And second of all, I think the media will start to pick it up.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that repetition is really important. I mean, that is one of their tactics, right? You know, they repeat the same things, and they're very disciplined about it. And somehow they are able to distribute these talking points that they all repeat, all the talking heads repeat.
Yep.
And
some of that is
seamlessly, right?
Absolutely.
And we don't have that. We don't have that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have sort of they have a series of different ways that they amplify and repeat stuff. One is there's some really great and large botnets, which of course do a lot of amplification, which games the social media platforms. That's why they get amplified so much. They have Fox, you know, Hannity, Tucker Carlson, all these people saying those things. And then they have, you know, they're saying these things on from the White House. Trump was asked by a reporter about QAnon the other day and said, oh, I hear they're very nice people. He frequently retweets them and refuses to disavow violent, right-wing violent extremists. He refuses to disavow conspiracy theories. He refuses to disavow QAnon. So as a result, they're really embracing. I'm not sure if they were initially intending to create a radical right extremist government, but by embracing extremists more and more tightly, they've essentially melded with it. I lost your sound.
Oh yeah, where I see, I think the weakness here is, you know, they have created this network, you know, call it amplification, what you will, but the Trump administration and campaign, and the Republican Party, and right-wing media, and the alt-right, and the militia, I mean, and the evangelical, I mean, their coalition is, I mean, really well integrated, and it's coordinating, and it's really turned into a many-headed monster. And of course, on the left, you know, we are very fractured. There's no discipline. Yeah.
So yes and no. So exactly. So one of the challenges that I see is that on the radical right, we'll see something that says voter fraud, and on the team normal. It's not even a matter of Democrats and not Democrats. It's just sort of people who are not extreme will say, actually, and there'll be a dozen 2,500 word articles written about it, but none of them share the same talking points. None of them share sharp headlines. So there's an opportunity for us to learn from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to.
But how do we do that? Okay, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
It's the right question to ask for sure. And I'm experimenting with this right now, as we can talk about it in a second, but we need two things. One is a set of responses that are as short, sharp, and simple as the disinformation, right? And we need to come together around those things. We need to share them and repeat them, share them and repeat them, share them and repeat them, even though it may seem a little simplistic. Because 3-word phrase versus 50, 2,500 word articles, the 3-word phrase is always going to win. So we need to own the 3-word phrase, and we need to come together around those things. We have a larger and stronger coalition of people. We're just not working together on this sort of messaging stuff yet. Right. So I'm experimenting with that on a website that we just launched Tuesday, called realityteam.org, where what we're doing is when we look at issues, we do a lot of research. These things get really complicated, right? And it's hard to know what's true. It's hard to know what to trust. So we go out and we spend a lot of time doing the research. And then we encapsulate what we learned into a short, sharp headline with another sentence or two of explanation. And then we give you our bibliography, all the references we used to figure this out. Sometimes we talk to experts. We try to use really authoritative sources, but it's just, rumor, reality, references. That's it. And so we hope to make these available to everyone, and hope people will spread them around and help us make them stronger and better. So that's part of the solution, right? Simplify and repeat, simplify and repeat, simplify and repeat. I think another part of the solution, though, is being able to do what Tucker Carlson did, right? Tucker Carlson radically reframed reality and turned a monster into a hero. We need to look at what we're dealing with and reframe it. We need to look at the avalanche of assaults against truth, science, rights, humanity, everything, and turn around and give it a name and frame that, so that now we're not always playing defense. We can also stake a claim. Yeah.
Well, let's do this. I know you brought some things that you wanted to show. Okay. So let's go over some of the things that you brought us to show us what you're talking about here. I would love to have a better understanding of exactly what their strategy is, what their tactics are, because I guess that's where I spend a lot of time doing, is like, how much of this is by design, and is somebody actually orchestrating all this? That's kind of where I start to lose my mind. It's like, I don't know what the causes are. I don't get the causal relationships. And so I think if I had a better understanding of what the strategy is, I think it might be helpful. So that you don't have to discuss that today, but that's just always like in the back of my mind. It's like, how do I sort out? Yeah. What is being done by design?
I think that so I want to address that, because it speaks to several issues at once that I think are really interesting. One is the idea that, is this by design? And I will say that the disinformation complex, if you will, like the industrial complex, but the disinformation complex, has had some elements of it that were extremely deliberate. The Russian disinformation operation is extremely deliberate. It started a long time ago. It started back in, the 2007, 8, 9. And they have been deliberately honing their tactics, strategies, and skills. They've been laying down infrastructure of these various bots, trolls, sock puppets, etc., to make it more effective. They've been using Facebook as a way to optimize messaging and amplify stuff for a very long time. And their tactics in doing that are clear and deliberate. Now, I do not necessarily think that the Republican Party, or let me make that a stronger statement. I do not think that the Republican Party intentionally radicalized itself. I think that Trump found that this disinformation was very useful to him, and that it worked, and that initially he didn't object, and it, soon thereafter sort of started embracing it. The disinformation used to come in from either the radical right or, we'll just say foreign operations, and gradually seep into the media. But it started going the other way around. And, Fox and the administration started making up their own stuff and pushed it the other way. And the extreme groups started amplifying that stuff. So the idea that it's orchestrated, it's not like there's a puppet master. That's not a real idea. But the fact that they have been so open and to embracing these tactics and embracing increasingly extreme people, extreme ideologies, including very violent ideologies, it has, as you say, formed a coalition. And the coalition, some of it is explicit, some of it is more informal, but they know their culture of that coalition is to rapidly come together around certain ideas and talking points and to spread them everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I know that, Trump has been able to kind of knit together this coalition on the right, partly because he's a bully and he's bullied a lot of people into submission. People who may not normally get along and go along with things actually are doing it because they're afraid of him. And they're not just afraid of him as a person, they're afraid of the influence he has over his supporters.
I think that's the bigger issue, yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess the question I keep coming back to is, one, we're running out of time. We have less than 10 weeks before the election.
Yeah.
And it just seems like we're to me at a big disadvantage. As much as people say, oh, but the polls are great for Biden. Look at all these Republicans
the polls are not
that are
great
coming
for
out. But look at all these Republicans coming, all these Republicans coming forward for Biden. So they have convinced themselves that somehow Biden is winning and we're going to win. And I'm just aghast.
So I don't think that's true. There are a couple of things that are really frightening me. So Biden is ahead, but not overwhelmingly so, and particularly in some of the swing states, right? And there are two kinds of pressure that the radical right extremists are bringing to bear here that really terrify me. One is around the election and casting doubt on the legitimacy of the election, aggressively pursuing every form of voter suppression they can think of, including debilitating the post office. Just sort of accusing Democrats of cheating, making allegations of fraud. If Trump really wanted a free and fair election, he'd pass the election security bills. He would create a strong, if he really thought there was going to be fraud, he'd bring in election inspectors, international election monitors. There are ways to ensure free and fair elections, and that is not what is happening there. The second thing that truly worries me is their ability to make you afraid of things that you shouldn't be afraid of. Violent mobs in the streets. I think that this mob violence, violent protest themes that are going around are extremely dangerous and extremely damaging and gaining momentum. The idea that, there have been a few incidents of looting and burning during protests. The vast, vast majority of the protesters are peaceful. They care about a very important cause. Police in this country are given an enormous amount of authority. Democracies demand authority come with accountability, and it is very reasonable to demand that. Turning that anger and outrage, that just anger and outrage, into terrifying mobs, that I think could convince a lot of people who are not really sure which way to go. It could scare them into going with Trump because Trump says he's going to solve it. Trump, in fact, could solve it if he wanted to. He could make sure that the police reform bill got passed. He could reinstate consent decrees in police departments where there have been problems. There's a lot he could do, but this is a scare campaign. So the two things that really worry me are the efforts to undermine the election and the efforts to make people think that they're that Democrats are violent mobs, when in fact, the extremism is coming from the right. And the Democrats are really the people that are saying, actually, we're normal. We believe the country is a fundamentally good place. The Constitution is a fundamentally good thing. The rule of law is what keeps us great. And that, equal protection and civil rights, these things matter. And that's how we get to be a stronger country. That's not a radical agenda. That's actually a pretty standard American agenda. That is a moderate American agenda. It is the fact that the radical right has tried to package all of that as scary and how effective that's become. That's what scares me. And I don't think that anybody should be complacent about the polls. I watch those polls obsessively, and they're not going in a good way.
Okay, so I'm curious to know what you brought that you wanted to share. And also, and then also, just while you're working on figuring that out, I also just wanted to point out a comment that's being made on this thread. Someone is asking if Putin is really coaching Trump through this. how much of these tactics are being borrowed from Putin. So that's one question. And the other question is, you know, I think just generally, people are just trying to figure out, you know, how do we best respond to this? And so I don't know exactly what you want to share right now, but I think if we could kind of gear the conversation towards, like, for people who do want to try to fight back against this kind of misinformation, you know, what do we do?
So a couple things. So the things I brought, I thought we were going to talk, you know, we had talked earlier about QAnon and how it was driving me personally insane, because I started hearing QAnon stuff coming out of my children's mouths. And my children are not, once it's coming out of my kids' mouths, it means it's very mainstream. They don't chase that sort of thing at all. So I brought a few articles that I'd picked up to talk about how extensive QAnon has become. But I think the issue of the Putin and Trump, we are never going to know exactly what's happening there. That's just not really within our ability to know. But it is very interesting that a week or 10 days ago, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence released the final portion of their report on foreign interference in the 2016 campaign. And their findings were much stronger and much more extensive than what was in the Mueller report. The Mueller report was looking for crimes. The intelligence investigation was looking for espionage, essentially, which is they're slightly different.
Okay, I feel like I'm getting a bit lost on that. So
sorry.
Let's do this. Since you have the screen share up, why don't we jump into that first, and then we can circle back to it. So let's look at the screen share here.
Okay. So I don't know how many people have heard of QAnon. I expect far more have heard of them now than had a couple months ago. I just was looking at some statistics that showed that search traffic on Facebook for QAnon was 10 times in July, was 10x what it was in January. So a lot more people are either engaged in it or looking for it. It is sort of the mother of all conspiracy theories. It is basically it's sort of a club cult game conspiracy theory that brings together Pizzagate and the deep state, and this idea that there are a globalist cabal that runs the world and the economy, and that they have secret people pulling the strings everywhere. They believe, and to support this, and the way they support this cabal is trafficking children in the sex trade. And that's just a tiny fraction of what it's about. But Q has become very effective in bringing people in, and it's become very accepted in mainstream. You see their signs at Trump rallies all the time. The FBI, I have this document too, the FBI has called them out as a likely domestic terror threat. Says that they do promote violence, and a number of quite a few incidents of violence are connected with them. They started out small in 2016. What I've read is that they actually kind of started out as a practical joke. And it's developed into this very far-reaching, extremely complex club where people go out searching for encoded information and this sort of thing. This gives people a sense that they're in the know. And it gives people a sense that they belong, and it gives people a sense that there is a puppet master. So when they don't understand the world, everything that's weird, oh, it's because of this globalist cabal and the deep state and all this stuff. You can buy Q swag on Etsy, on Amazon, it's everywhere. The reason this is troubling me so much now is because weird themes from QAnon are now getting attention in the mainstream media. Things like, I don't even like to say it, but all the stuff about the deep state doing this, the deep state doing that. And, you know, some of the stuff that was coming out of my kids' mouths where they were saying, is this really true about Joe Biden? And these were really bizarre ideas. And so the danger is they are effectively a cult, and they are infusing the world with their strange ideas. If you don't know much about them, oh yeah, here's another thing. 11 GOP candidates for Congress have won the Republican nomination. And many of them are in deeply red districts. And so there are QAnon believers that are now going to be in Congress. And if that doesn't scare you, you're very brave.
Let me just see if I understand. You're saying there are 11 congressional candidates who won primaries in red districts that are QAnon believers? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So
okay.
There were something along the lines of 50 candidates who embraced QAnon who were running. Several of them were endorsed by the president as well as other members of Congress. 11 of them have won the nomination. In other words, they won the Republican primary for the Republican seat in that house, so in that district. So in November, when they have the general election, several of them are likely to win and become members of Congress. Was that any simpler, or is that still confusing?
Yeah, so it's not 11 who are likely to become members of Congress, but some of the 11.
Some of
I'm
the
just
11
trying to figure out the
nearly
number.
certain.
Yeah. So you don't have a number beyond.
I had it in here
roughly, because I only heard about one. I only heard about one person who's actually likely to be a member of Congress. So 11 is a new number. So
11 is the number that have won their nominations. I don't know the exact number of who's likely to win, but it is more than one.
Okay, that's a mess.
Yep.
No, we're just in uncharted territory, and I guess I'm just trying to figure out how we can avoid becoming absolutely panicked in a situation where it feels like Trump keeps getting away with everything. And that we are losing our grip on reality as a country. Just that I'm just talking about the totality of the problem is that a lot of us just are going to shut down, or we are going to start to feel so gaslit that we're going to start questioning our own sense of reality.
So we need an anchor to reality. There's the most important thing that everyone can do, right? Double check your registration and make a plan to vote. Are you going to vote by mail? If you're going to vote by mail, are you going to try to return your ballot by mail? Are you going to use a drop box? Are you going to take it to City Hall? Are you going to vote early? When is that available? Like, make sure you know the exact date, time, and place that you are going to vote. That's the most important thing that you can do. The second thing is, as I say, we need a way to look at the problem as a whole. It's the it's the 1,000 different threads that make it overwhelming and make you want to despair, right? That's what makes you want to go into that fetal position. We can't be in that fetal position now. We're 68 days away from the election now. We need to be out there in full force. If the idea of packaging the whole notion of MAGA and the bizarre right radical extremism that it has come to embrace and mean, if that is helpful to put that in a box and put a label on it and say, that's radical right extremism, and when it comes up, you don't have to worry about the specific outrage. You can put it in that box. We're not fighting 1,000 different outrages. We are fighting one outrage. And that is the embrace of extremism to terrify the country into collapse. So you're just fighting that.
Okay. So I have a friend who is, I would say, center left, pretty centrist, moderate, who is probably progressive in a lot of her policy views, but really can't relate to the purest part of the left, right? And so
What
she
does she
feels like
consider the purest? Yeah, what do you mean?
people who say things like defund the police,
Mm.
believe all women, people who have litmus tests for Democratic candidates, people who maybe even some of the people who showed up in Alice Morgan harassing people eating at restaurants.
Yeah, that's not helpful. That sort of stuff is definitely not helpful.
Well,
the first time I
wait, let me just state the question.
Sure,
So
sorry.
the question, yeah, it's okay. So like her point of view is there are things that we are contributing on the left, right? So it's not just the right wing behaving badly, but
Sure.
we're making it worse, okay, on the left. Not everybody, it's not about everybody, but there are elements on the left making things worse, and can we get a handle on that? Because it's like throwing fuel to the fire, when we go out there screaming at people eating at restaurants.
Yeah, you're not the first person to ask that today.
Yeah. And so, and I am as left as you can get in terms of policies, but in terms of creating an effective theory of change, I am all with my centrist friend who's like, no, we got to have constructive, compassionate conversations with people. We can't go around
I completely agree
name
with you.
calling and screaming at people and calling for, radical solutions.
So I do think that there is
make people
something,
feel scared.
So I agree with you, and that stuff makes me wince. It makes me cringe. It hurts me because it does hurt. It hurts progress. It hurts dialogue. It hurts a lot of stuff. That said, if you really want to feel better about that stuff, go listen to what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are saying about those things. Because it turns out that the people screaming defund the police are not actually running for president. There are people who have extreme views on the left. There are people who have, I'll say, misguided ideas about how to make progress, but they're not actually running for president. That's kind of the difference, right? There were always people, and if you look at Biden has made very clear statements about, he does not believe in defunding the police. In fact, he'd like to invest another, an additional immediate $300,000 into community policing, personal safety and training for police, and also bringing social workers in so that police aren't necessarily dealing with things like addiction and mental illness that they're not really trained or appropriate to deal with, right? So if you look at what's happening, if you look at some of that negative stuff and you look at what Biden, who is the actual presidential candidate, and Kamala Harris and the people that they're working with, they are not embracing those things. In fact, that they are specifically decrying those things in the way that Trump will not decry QAnon or speak out against the Ku Klux Klan or any of these radical militias. Biden and Harris are more than comfortable saying, no, that's not what we believe. We don't think that's helpful. Now, for some reason, those statements don't carry as much in social media and on the media. And that's because, of course, simplistic, terrifying statement, nuanced, complete answer.
Yeah. Well, okay. So here's where I would like to pick up next time. Okay. I think my feeling is what we're lacking on the left, okay, is not just that we don't have a cohesive coalition right now, but we don't have a clear story ourselves. You know, what is our story of America right now? What is our story of this election right now? Okay. I don't think we've nailed that story. It's all over the place. All right. And so we've created a narrative vacuum that is getting filled by the right wing. All right. And
I love it when you I love it when you talk about narratives.
Yeah,
so you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And to be honest, Democrats have historically been terrible at that. But Obama was terrible at it. Clinton was a little better, but
no, he was great in 08. He was great in 2008.
His first campaign, Hope and Change, that was great. But nobody really understood what Obamacare was, or even that it was the same thing as the Affordable Care Act. Nobody understood what TPP was. Nobody understood what he wanted to achieve in Afghanistan. And it's not because they didn't have very deep thinking on those things. They did, but they didn't have the top levels. So people didn't appreciate what was going on, and they didn't realize how important that was. Obama had incredible speechwriters. His speeches were beautiful, right? Poetry, right? But they were not effective in encapsulating his ideas down to a piece where everyone could understand it. Hillary failed in a very similar way. You can argue about the specifics of what any particular policy, but they were not good at packaging and marketing their policy and what they stood for. And Biden, I would say, is actually doing slightly better. Certainly recently, since the Democratic convention, they've sort of built out what they mean by Build Back Better and that sort of thing. But you're absolutely right. There is a gaping hole where the Democratic narrative belongs.
Okay, so again, I feel like we should pick this up next time, because we could go on for 5 hours at this point because we're starting to unpack all this other stuff. But this is what I want to leave you with, okay? And I get into arguments all the time right now with Democrats about this. Even though I'm a Democrat, I'm a registered Democrat. I'm one of the super volunteers in the party. But my criticism of the Democratic Party and the recent convention, okay, is that it was very Trump focused. We still don't really know what this campaign is about, what Biden really stands for. Okay, he's compassionate and decent, fine, but how are you going to help our country right now? Okay, because I'm sorry, compassion is not enough. Decency is not enough. We need solutions because these are massive problems, right? you know. And what just let me finish. The other thing is, one of the things that I don't remember who said this, but one of the analysis that I read about 2016 was, as crazy as Trump is, he spoke to the pain, the hurt that many Americans were feeling. And Hillary never spoke to that pain, never acknowledged it. And I think that we're still not acknowledging it. Okay,
So
we're still going around talking about our own pain, and we're only talking about the problems that Trump has caused. But this pain goes back before Trump, which is why Trump won in the first place. Okay, so again, I would
say that I think that this is a good topic for our next chat, for sure. It's fundamental in its core, but I would argue that I don't think Trump tapped into pain so much as fear. And I would also argue that if you saw Biden's nomination acceptance speech, that he understands pain and loss and compassion. He actually cares in a way that Trump speaks to fear, but I don't think he has ever shown any kind of compassion for people who are in pain or are suffering the collapse of their communities or their industries, their jobs,
right,
their health.
So what I'm trying to say, Deb, overall is this. We can't just fight disinformation, okay? We have to figure out the narrative on our side.
There's an offensive. There is a proactive part of this.
Yeah,
and honestly,
it's not there. It's not there.
It is not nearly as powerful as it needs to be. Here's the thing, though, and I would ask this of you, and I would ask this of anyone who watches this. 68 days. Okay.
Yeah.
So we need simplicity, not complexity. If Biden brings compassion and a legion of competence to government,
right,
that is, to me, a very strong statement on its own. Decency and competence is where we need to get back to. An embrace of radical extremism is where we need to get away from. So 68 days, how do we address the vacuum?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we are in complete agreement about the importance of getting people to vote. And you know, that's what I'm spending most of my time doing.
I know, and I'm grateful for that.
And I am totally with you that decency and compassion and competence are all great qualities. Okay. It's not a substitute for story. Okay. We don't have a story of America. Okay. We don't have something that unites the country through a strong narrative. And that's a problem that we need to fix, is what I'm saying.
I completely agree with you. And what I'm saying is 68 days, we need everyone's minds melded on how do you do this in a way that is effective and simple. And by the way, not as part of the campaign.
Well, I mean, I think this is where we need artists, writers, storytellers, you know, to help fill out the gaps. Like the campaign and the DNC kind of put together a spine for us to campaign. But think about what Shepard Fairey did with the Hope poster in 2008, right?
Yep, that was beautiful.
You know, yeah, and all the great videos that were made that showed Obama to be our savior, and you know, those Superman images of Obama. You know, there's just so much that creative people can do to fill out the details to really make this come alive, right? And so we need to engage all the we need to engage all the creative people to really take this on and help tell the story. And instead of just feeling completely battered and up against the wall and just staring at our phones and our news feeds, we got to start creating stuff. We got to start creating stuff. We got to ask our friends with the talent to tell stories visually, through music, whatnot. We got to get them to fill in the details. Imagine
I think
Obama's
that's right.
campaign without the Shepherd Ferry poster. I mean, it wouldn't have been the same campaign.
So let me take that a tiny step further.
Okay.
And say, everyone's creative. We need the superstars, but we need everyone to tell their part of that story. And we can give them a place to tell it. And if you want to either comment on this Facebook page or in this community, or email info@realityteam.org, we can collect what you create, even if it's 15 seconds of you saying what's important to you. We can collect that stuff and do something with it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like I do this every day. I mean, I'm constantly trying to engage people in building that narrative. I had a whole project called Story of America
out to the world, right?
Okay, so thank you, Deb.
Thank you very much,
you're
Annabelle.
like such an amazing conversation partner right now. I want a lot of people to listen to you, and I love collaborating with you and coming out with responses, and also just trying to figure out how to stay sane. I mean, I'm glad that I'm able to call you now and just be like, oh my God, what did I just see? It really helps.
I know.
I mean, it makes me
Today was
like
a particularly tough one, huh?
Yeah,
I appreciate it too. I
thing.
particularly appreciate the ability to have this conversation with someone who doesn't spend their days with, elbow deep in disinformation. So it's not intellectual, it's real, it's every day. How do we cope as human beings? And I think that conversation about how do we as human beings cope with this onslaught is the conversation we need to have. This is hard and it's confusing, and we need each other, you and I, and the broader community as well, to support each other and to give each other ideas and to applaud those ideas and to support those ideas.
Great. Well, I'm a huge fan. Anything you need, I want to try to help you reach as many people as possible. So thank you for being such a hero, trying to save the country. I mean, really, I mean it with all honesty. Like, I know you're doing this from your heart, and I am very grateful to you. And we'll do it again. We just keep at it. Just
keep at it. There's no choice. There's no option. We just gotta keep trying.
Yeah. So, and everybody, everybody come to countmeintoWin.org. We're developing really good talking points to respond to the right wing on our website. We have a draft. We're going to publish it at some point. And, Deb really has been a leader in helping us figure out how to do that, like short and simple responses to common talking points. So thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you so much, Annabelle, for including me and engaging me and talking to me this way. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Oh, just to reiterate your main talking point, and that your main call to action is the repetition. Can you just emphasize that part again, the importance of repetition? Yeah.
Absolutely. So when we have a name for something, and the name I'm using here for the big wave of awful is radical right extremism. If we use that name and we put it at the beginning of every response, every sentence, if every time we're horrified by the next thing Tucker Carlson says, we repeat that term, radical right extremism, you will find that it grows. People will pick it up, people will remember it, people will recognize it, the media will start adopting it. That's why simple narratives win, because they're clear, they're right, and they're repetitive.
Thank you so much. I will talk to you again soon, next week, right?
Thank you very much for all the things.
Okay.
Talk to
Bye.
you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Conversations About a Way Forward from Count Me In to Win and The Talk on Main Street. To learn more, find us on Facebook at The Talk on Main Street.